This research seeks to investigate the effect which proroguing the Parliament has on voter perception of the Prime Minister and the governing party. In order to accomplish this, it will focus on the acceptance rate of Parliament prorogation and track the approval rating of the governing party along with that of the PM. Further to this, the attained results will be examined taking into account a gender control variable in order to determine whether the results can be replicated to both genders. The rationale behind this research rests in the observation that the use of the prorogation tactic on multiple occasions by the Harper government has led to a general mistrust of the Conservative Party and the job that the PM is doing. This argument relies specifically on the rationale placed forward by Mark Kennedy, who reasoned that it has become evident that Stephen Harper has been clinging to power through any means necessary, the prorogation tactic being one of them. So, the approach will focus initially on determining the level of approval of prorogation itself, and then attempt to distinguish if this correlates to the approval rating of the job Stephen Harper is doing as PM. In addition, the research will examine the intention to vote Conservative before the overuse of the prorogation tactics and after its use. This will be in order to argue that the tactic itself can be considered a factor in the Conservative Party's decline in voting intention. In addition, in order to elaborate on the findings, this research will also seek to distinguish whether there is a difference in the results between men and women, thereby examining whether the results can be replicated. This elaboration relies on the research of prominent psychologist Cordelia Fine, who argues that there is no scientific evidence for innate variances between the way in which a man and a woman think, arguing that commonly perceived differences are a result of societal and cultural forces. She argues that opinions such as that of psychologist Simon Baron-Cohen, who argues that the female brain is predominantly hardwired for empathy while the male brain is predominantly hardwired for understanding and building systems, are incorrect. So, examining whether the results can be replicated when considering a gender control variable should lead to some form of clarification on this matter. Hypotheses and rationale. H1. Before the overuse of the proroguing of the Canadian Parliament, the Conservative voting intention was higher than it is today. The rationale is that in the previous national elections, the intention to vote Conservative was significantly higher than it is today, and the Harper government was significantly preferred over the opposition, even though it was about to enter in its third term, which indicates that up to that point, there was a general acceptance of its policies. H2. Overuse of the prorogation of the Canadian Parliament has resulted in mistrust and significantly decreased the intention to vote Conservative. The rationale is that the current intention to vote Conservative has significantly decreased since the previous federal elections. The Conservative Party was elected into a third term, which indicated a general acceptance of its policies. However, since then, the general intention to vote Conservative has significantly decreased, and this indicates that the factors which have led to this should be evident in the third term of the Conservative Party. Therefore, it should be argued that the misuse of the prorogation of the Canadian Parliament could be a factor, since many view this as this tactic was previously misused by the Harper government, and that it is misusing it again in order to avoid discourse over the recent Senate expense scandal. H3. There is a correlation between the disapproval of the prorogation of Parliament and the disapproval of Stephen Harper's job as PM. Stephen Harper has used the prorogation tactic on more than one instance in the past. This has led the prorogation tactic to become salient to many Canadians. Harper's prorogation of Parliament in 2008 and 2010 is believed by many to have been strategically implemented in order to avoid a coalition government in the first instance and the Afghan detainee issue in the latter. As a result, Canadians are more attuned to the implementation of this tactic, which many view as a method to avoid liability, and therefore there seems to be a correlation between the disapproval of Harper himself and the prorogation of Parliament. H4. There is no significant difference in the opinions mentioned above when considering gender as a control variable. Simon Baron-Cohen argues that women are hardwired to process information predominantly through emotion, which in this situation would disperse their opinion. Contrary to this, Cordelia Fine argues that there is no biological difference in the male and female brain structure, therefore there should not be a difference in opinion. Correlation matrix. Multi-model regression analysis. And the summary of the patterns observed. In regards to the correlation matrix, the approval rate of proroguing Parliament, the following percentage amounts explain the variation for each case. The significant for each correlation aside from that of gender is 0.0, and there's a moderately strong relationship between the DV and the vote in last election category, while there is a strong relationship between the DV and the current vote disposition, along with vote in last election and Harper approval. The high relationship between Harper approval and the DV, along with Harper approval and current vote disposition and vote in last election and current vote disposition, may suggest that these variables are measuring the same thing. But for the purposes of this research, it was necessary to demonstrate the voting dispositions before and after the latest prorogue by the Harper administration in order to prove its effect. In regard to the multi-model regression analysis, the significance of the equation is below 0.05, and this indicates that the results are not due to sampling error. The B coefficient is 1.06, and the increase for each independent variable is 0.01, 0.01, and 0.39 from bottom up, as each is measured against the DV in the category that does not consider gender. In the regression, which considers gender as a control variable, there is no significant difference. The R-square is 0.27, and this indicates that the variation approval or not of prorogation explains 27% of the variation in the Conservative Party's approval score. Conclusion. In closing, the point of this research was to examine whether proroguing Parliament had an effect on the political image of the governing party and Prime Minister. In addition, a control variable of gender was added in order to see if the results could be replicated. The relationship between the DV and the IV seemed to suggest that there is a moderate relationship between each other in explaining the decline of conservative voting intention, but the control variable offers no significance, indicating that the arguments of Cordelia Fine are correct.